Let's find out if you're ready for love. Here's your marvelous host, Nikki Lee.
Hello, and welcome to Ready for Love Radio. This is your host and love coach, Nikki Lee. Do you have a problem overthinking things? Do you kind of get stuck thinking and thinking and thinking, and you just can't stop? Maybe you just kind of harp on things, and your partner's like, would you stop already? Or maybe you just say, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just going to do the Scarlett O'Hara, I'll think about it tomorrow, Well, there's a middle ground. Neither one of those is really the way to go. And my guest today is Alicia Munoz, and if I got that wrong, she can straighten me out. And she wrote a book called, now let me get this. This is a long title, but it's a neat title though. Stop Overthinking Your Relationship. Break the cycle of anxious rumination to nourish love, trust, and connection with your partner. Now, it's a long title, but it's an interesting idea, and I can see ways that can improve your relationship and make things better, and I think it would probably lower your stress level, too. So, Alicia, it's awesome to have you with me today.
It's great to be here, Nikki. Thank you for asking me to join and connect with your listeners.
And you're from Virginia, too, I believe, aren't you?
Well, I live here. Originally, I'm from D.C., and then I went and lived in New York for a bunch of decades and came back and settled down in Virginia.
Awesome. See, I don't have people from Virginia very often. It's kind of exciting.
I know. We're neighbors.
I know. And you've actually been to where I am, so this is nice. I like it.
It's great.
So, I know. I had forgotten that, and I was looking over my notes yesterday. And I went, "Oh yeah, she's nearby." Oh my! And we were almost far enough to miss the worst of the hurricanes. So this is a good weekend.
I know. So, when we were emailing back and forth, I was like, "Oh yeah, she's got the rain going and the backyard flooding and all that."
Oh yeah, and the wind blowing and the branches coming down and leaves going everywhere, but the power stayed on. That was the important part. So, and power this morning, so we can do this.
Yes.
So Alicia is a certified couples therapist, author of 4 relationship books, including Stop Overthinking Your Relationship. And over the past 16 years, she's provided individual, group, and couples therapy in clinical settings, including Bellevue Hospital in New York. She currently works as a senior writer and editor at Psychotherapy Networker and a couples therapy in private practice. She connects with her readers and followers through monthly blogs, newsletters, and podcasts, as well as through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And she's a member of the Washington School of Psychiatry, the American Psychological Association, and the Mid-Atlantic Association of, how do you pronounce that?
Imago,
and relationship therapist. And I'm going to have all of those links on the show page so that people can get in touch with her. So how did you get into this field? Because, relationship counseling and that kind of thing, that I didn't even know that sort of thing existed until I started doing work for Dr. Ava and discovered love coaching. I didn't even know that was such a thing. How did you get into that?
Oh, well, I kept messing up my relationships, Nikki. I kept getting into the same terrible situations, and it was always their fault. And, and then at a certain point, I said, okay, wait a minute, what's the common denominator here? And obviously it was me. So I started to get into looking at my patterns, kind of going over different childhood traumas and seeing how I had become a pursuer, distancer in my romantic relationships. And through that, I started to get involved in couples counseling and went back to graduate school and made it my commitment to help couples avoid some of the pitfalls that I had fallen into.
Now, wait a second. Did you say a pursuer and a distancer?
Yeah, one wasn't enough for me. I like doing them both. So I would go back and forth between pursuing my partners, and then, if they would turn and meet me with open arms, I would run screaming naked into the night in the other direction.
So it was all about the chase.
Yeah.
Once you caught them, you weren't interested anymore.
Yeah, that was the pattern, and it gets old. It gets old after a while.
Yeah, for them too, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was listening to you. Wait a second, hold on. We need to. I need to verify she said what I think she said. Okay. Just warning you. You never know what I'm going to ask you next.
That's right. Keep me on my toes.
Yeah. I thought that's what you said. So, all right. So let's start with the big question, okay? And there's going to be a couple in here, I have a feeling. What is the most important thing a person can do to have a better relationship? Let's just bring out the big guns from the beginning.
Yeah, you're cutting to the chase here. So this isn't necessarily easy to do, but I would say the most important thing that a person can do to have a better relationship is to cultivate a growth mindset. And yeah, by that, I mean that many of us tend to kind of start our romantic journey with a fixed mindset where, we oversimplify things, we see things in black and white terms, good and bad, right and wrong. We have a tendency to dismiss the little victories or the little moments, that matter, like your partner, remembering a detail about a restaurant that you liked, or, buying you your favorite candy, or, coming with a rose to tell you that they enjoyed their date with you. So we tend to dismiss a lot of the little things and to have these very fixed views of what we want in a partner. And
right.
that will sabotage love pretty quickly. So, the sooner you can start to cultivate a growth mindset, which is essentially just being willing to learn, being curious, being humble, embracing complexity, which is super hard to do, where, you see things that are more in the gray than in the black and white, right and wrong arena, then, you really step into relationship as a learning process more than as just something that, you flip a switch, you meet the right person, and, you live happily ever after.
I like that.
Which part do you like, Nikki?
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but once you have your expectations set, I see how you can stop appreciating things that may be wonderful, but they aren't what you've got your mind set on.
Yeah.
I'm very big on the little things, and I learned a long time ago there aren't enough big things to get excited about, so enjoy the little things in life. And
I love that.
I'm not saying I don't love the big things too.
Yeah.
But, enjoy the little things. Because the the little things, well, and especially with some of the stuff I was telling you I've gone through lately, in the last 6-7 years, boy, the little things mean a lot more to me than they ever did, and they were special to me before. But if you can get yourself to the point where just appreciating family, friends, your significant other, your partner, whoever, doing things, putting the time and effort into doing something for you, that changes your whole outlook.
Absolutely.
Don't put a qualifier on it has to be a certain size or it has to be exactly what I want, but they did something for me and appreciate. Man, that changes your outlook.
It's a game changer.
It is. It is in a huge way, and it's a game changer for you and for them. Because you're showing so much more appreciation. And I don't mean you've got to grovel and overly gush or whatever, but show appreciation. Say thank you. Make them know that you appreciate that they did it, that kind of thing.
I think, I think that, there are a lot of people, when you tell them that, are going to say, or, might say, well, but I don't want to be fake, and I wanted a dozen roses. I didn't want just one solitary, scraggly rose. I wanted 12 beautiful roses, and why I'm going to be fake if I'm like, oh, wow, thank you so much for this rose. And what I try to tell people and couples that I see is, separate it out. Appreciate the one rose. Celebrate the one rose. Enjoy that they thought of you, that they took the time, that they gave you that offering. And then at a different time, you can tell them, hey, I would really love a dozen roses, for my birthday or for my anniversary. But don't muddle it by trying to give them an appreciation and a criticism at the same time. Right. Speaking of this whole concept, I loved the story the person that wrote the foreword for your book told about the snowstorm and her husband. Yeah. Loved that was so great. And it was, I was like, it's amazing how many times the mind goes to that kind of thing, but do you stop yourself from saying it? Because it would have killed the moment, but after all that effort, and actually I'll never tell it right. Would you share that story with the audience? Because I think it works with what we're talking about, and it was an awesome story. Yeah, this is Linda Carroll, who's an amazing writer in her own right and has written books for couples, was generous enough to write the introduction to my book, and she was talking about how a tree fell in her yard in Oregon, and her husband went out and chopped it up and cut all the branches off and lugged the wood away and then spent the whole day doing that, getting muddy and wet. And then when she walked out onto the porch and saw that he hadn't finished his job, there were some, tools still lying in the yard, she could notice her mind was immediately starting to judge him, to criticize him, to kind of catastrophize or globalize. He never puts the tools away. He always does things part way instead of, doing it perfectly. And then she noticed that she had really disconnected from her own gratitude for him and wasn't seeing the reality that her husband had put in all this work to take care of business. Exactly. But she noticed that before she said something negative. Yeah. She did notice it. She did notice it. And that's the trick, or the life hack that that I write about in this book is, how do you notice when overthinking and the different currents of overthinking have hijacked you and are, it's like overthinking is like this stream that pulls you down, and it pulls you away from being able to pause and reflect and be intentional. So how do you get out of that river or stream and just sit on the shore and take a moment and look at what you're thinking and try to assess, is this productive? Is this helpful? Is this even true, what I'm thinking? I know, like, right. For me, one of my triggers with my husband is we'll be driving and we have a new car, so it beeps. It makes this beeping sound whenever he forgets to put on the turn signal. It lets you know that, okay, you're changing lanes and you haven't put on your turn signal. And he's already checked. He's looked in the mirrors. He knows there's nobody in the lane, so he'll just move over without doing the turn signal. Sometimes, not always. But I will immediately go into this overthinking, of he's not doing it right. He's risking our lives. If our son sees this, he's going to learn to be a terrible driver. This is disrespectful to me because I've asked him so many times, always put on your turn signal. So I'll go into this negative spiral. And if I don't check myself, I'll start criticizing him while he's driving, which will raise his stress level, which will actually end up being far more of a risk than the fact that he, didn't hit that switch to put on his turn signal on an empty highway, So that's how overthinking can really hijack you in these little everyday moments with your partner.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a driving pet peeve or two myself. and there's sometimes I can keep my mouth shut about it, and there's other times that I just there's an intersection near my house that just drives me nuts because I know how people come around that corner, and if you're too far over, I've seen people almost get hit, and it drives me crazy when somebody's too far over, and it just there are times I can't stop it. I just can't. Yeah. Well, and I know what will happen to me if the car is hit, and that doesn't help. So.
Yeah. Right.
Self-preservation.
And it's I think what makes thinking so challenging and overthinking so challenging for people is that a lot of the thinking that we do, not a lot, but it depends. A lot of it can be very healthy. What you just described at that intersection, sounds like some degree of healthy thinking. You're very aware that there's a high risk at this intersection. Cars do come around the bend, and so you want to problem solve. You want to figure out a way to avoid an accident. And
right.
Overthinking would be that you narrowly, maybe you almost had an accident or you almost saw somebody have an accident, and for the next, 6 hours, your mind is just cycling through over and over again these thoughts where you're cursing and blaming and thinking about writing letters to the city and you're worrying about the future, and you're making yourself sick with anxiety because of something.
It's the intersection right there.
Right. Right.
Just happens to be a block from my house. So why do you think that overthinking is such a big problem in relationships?
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons for it. I think particularly in relationships, we get triggered. There are a lot of reasons. One reason is that we don't know we're doing it. So a lot of the time it's just this passive thoughts that are kind of going on in the background, and we're not aware of them, and we're not aware of how they're impacting the way we speak, our facial expressions, the things we say. So, that kind of low grade negativity or maybe, control, like your partner leaves crumbs on the counter and you hate crumbs on the counter. You grew, you grew up in poverty, or you grew up with a lot of filth, and so you're very triggered by filth or dirt, or, and so you start to have all these negative thoughts about how your partner doesn't do their part, and then it comes out in criticism. It comes out in controlling behaviors. Sometimes it comes out in feeling really sorry for yourself, and that energy can impact your ability to connect with your partner and to feel loving and to enjoy being together.
So what can we do? Well, and it's the other person's normal most of the time. It's something that they have done and they're used to doing, and they see nothing wrong with it.
Right. Right.
I can think of quite a few examples right off the top of my head. But I won't bring them up right now. So what kind of steps can we take to stop overthinking?
So one of the things that's really important is to be able to recognize the different cues in your life that signal that you're doing a lot of overthinking. And some of those cues might be things that you notice about yourself, and some of those cues might be things that your partner notices about you. I mean, your partner will probably notice you're being super grouchy or irritable, or being over controlling with the kids or with your pets or with the finances. They'll see that you're being stressed out. And so, it's important to be able to listen. It's hard to listen when your partner is telling you, hey, wow, you're really acting stressed out, or what's wrong, you're very irritable. But it's important to be able to listen and wonder, I wonder if they're right. I wonder if I wonder what's going on in my head. What's happening in my thoughts? Have I been thinking a lot of negative thoughts about the future, ruminating a lot about something I did a week ago at my job that I feel ashamed about, and I'm just ruminating about my boss and what they said and how I should have responded and why didn't I respond that way, and so it's important to be able to notice the cues in your life, and sometimes you can notice them in yourself. You can notice that you're not sleeping well, or you're having a lot of body aches and pains from stress, or you're feeling depressed, or you've been crying at the drop of a hat, or you've been drinking too much, and you don't know why. So it's important to look at the outward signals, because overthinking is so subtle. It happens in our heads. Nobody sees it. And sometimes we don't even see it. So it really is helpful if you can pause and slow down, take 10 minutes and check in with yourself, and just, climb out of that river of overthinking, sit on that shore and just look, okay, what are the thoughts that are going through my head? I suggest that people try to journal, try to keep a journal where you shamelessly write down what you're thinking. Nobody has to see what you're thinking, but, write down what you're thinking so that you can be aware of it.
Well, and journaling is a great way to just get things out of your head.
Yeah.
There's been times that I've had things stuck in my head, and I've had nightmares about things, and as soon as I get them on paper, the nightmares stop.
Yeah.
I just have to get it out.
Yeah.
And it'll keep replaying in my head until I do that.
Yeah.
And writing it out longhand with a pencil or a pen works a whole lot better than typing it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, it's coming out the body when you're writing it. That works better for me.
Yeah.
And other people have the same thing.
Yeah, well, you're connected to, your body is much more connected when you're writing longhand, and
Yeah.
you're not looking at a screen, you're able to really drop into your body, and
Yeah.
And it's, so writing, when you're able to either label your thoughts by identifying what you're thinking, or you can also notice different patterns of thoughts. So you might notice, wow, I'm having a lot of thoughts that are blaming today, or like I was in the car when my husband didn't put on the blinker, or you might notice that you're having a lot of controlling thoughts where, you're just wanting to make sure something comes out exactly the way you want, or you're doubting yourself. You're constantly second guessing yourself, and you're doubting yourself. Did I do the right thing? Should I do something different? Or you're worrying, or my favorite, this is one of my types. I have a lot of, at my worst, I have a lot of self-pitying thoughts. Poor me, life is so unfair. This isn't okay. Everything's so unfair. And self-pitying thoughts are another form of overthinking that really are disempowering, because they keep you stuck in something that's not true. They keep you stuck in this place where you are waiting for someone else to rescue you.
How sometimes something sounds so good when we're thinking it, but then as soon as you say it out loud, you're like, oh, that sounds stupid. It can be the same way that it may sound really good in our head or make a lot of sense in our head, but once you write it down and then see it on paper, it sounds different to you.
Yeah.
So it's seeing it in a different form can somehow make us see it, feel it, interpret it differently.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say?
I absolutely know what you're trying to say. I mean, and what came to me when you said that was that it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz, where, like you pull the curtain back and you see there's just this little guy there, running the show. And I see, we all have an ego, right? Like this part of us that is just all about me. And when you can pull the curtain back on your overthinking and look at it, even if you're journaling it or just writing down the thought, then it's humbling. It's humbling, and it doesn't have as much power. It can't run the show. It's more, there's a way where you're taking, you're being mindful.
True. Well, that's just like when I go to edit something, I look at the document, and normally, we have a white background and black letters, right? Mm-hmm. When I'm doing the final edit, I change it to a black background and white letters.
Yeah. That
way I'm seeing it opposite, and that helps me to pick out my mistakes because I'm looking at it totally different.
Oh.
So it's the same idea.
That's such a great...
We're viewing it differently.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. That's a great metaphor, yeah. And the more that we can do that with our own thoughts, seeing them opposite, then you're really cultivating that growth mindset, that ability to look at life and at your partner through different perspectives, not just through the perspective of your own ego.
Yeah. Well, and we need to look at ourselves in a different way, The only time I've ever done that is when I was going through cancer treatment, and I literally felt like I was looking down on myself from, like, outside my body. That was very weird. Yeah. But, so for people that may not have heard of ruminating, what is ruminating?
Ruminating, in my book, I kind of put it under a big umbrella of repetitive negative overthinking is one way of defining ruminating. Some people see it more in terms of the past, that ruminating is when you're looking at a past event and you keep rehearsing it over and over again and recycling it over and over again and trying to change it. It's in the past, so you can't change it. It happened. It's over. But So that the kind of small definition of it would be thinking over and over again about the past in a way that's unhealthy and destructive. I like to think of ruminating more as an umbrella term that covers all kinds of negative overthinking, negative repetitive overthinking.
Negative repetitive. Okay. Interesting. So you talk about rumination cycles.
Yeah. These are those different patterns of thoughts that I kind of alluded to earlier, where they're predictable patterns of thoughts that have a kind of a certain emotional energy behind them. So blame cycles, control cycles, doubt cycles, worry cycles, and self-pity cycles. These are different kind of thought categories where you're just caught in this emotional energy and this reactivity toward something that's upset you. And, your thoughts are just caught in this one loop, whether of blame, control, doubt, worry, or self-pity.
Okay, give me an example.
Yeah. So, for example, there was the driving example where I was caught in a blame cycle with my partner. But you might say that I'm trying to think of one that happened recently. Another one. What comes to mind is it happens a lot with children. I'll use an example with a child where, they're not setting the table properly, or they're not coming to eat, or they're not eating all their food, and maybe 6 or 7 year old kid, and you're trying to control them. You're thinking they have to eat. If they don't eat, they're going to be unhealthy. They're not going to grow. I have to go talk to the pediatrician. Maybe I need to, lecture my child for 10 minutes or have them read some articles on nutrition and the importance of eating well. That's a control cycle. These are just essentially they're thoughts that are going round and round in your head, and they're impacting then how you behave toward that person in your life.
Okay. One of the ones that, or one of the things that I talk about on here sometimes is people getting in a victim mindset. Would that kind of also be like having getting into a self-pity rumination cycle?
Absolutely. Yeah. The self-pity rumination cycle is very much being in a victim consciousness or in a victim mindset where, your thoughts are just disempowering you. And it's, that you might be in a situation that is difficult, or that it might seem like there's no way out of it. There are lots of examples of that with partners, where you're fighting, or they did something that hurt you, or they keep forgetting to pay the mortgage, and you keep getting charged a fee, and things are happening over and over again, and you feel like a victim. You feel frustrated, you feel helpless, and the thoughts, though, that you're having are almost like wheels spinning in the mud. So the thoughts are making you sink deeper and deeper into the mud. They're not getting you out of the mud pit. They're keeping you stuck. And that's why it can be so important to be able to notice, because you can't often, you can't control, there are times when you can't control your external circumstances, but you can control how you relate to them and how you think about them. And so
if you get stuck in the mindset and your thoughts get stuck, it's 10 times harder to make a change.
Exactly.
Your mindset plays such a huge part in getting yourself motivated and taking action to change things. So, okay.
Yeah, and part of what may be counterintuitive but can be really helpful, and in fact, what therapists do or coaches do, I'm sure you do this too with the clients you've worked with, is, you try to help people feel what's underneath all these thoughts, or what's underneath the negative mindset, what's underneath feeling like a victim. So you try to help people experience their feelings, and those feelings are often really uncomfortable. You might feel helpless, you might feel grief-stricken, you might feel angry, and a lot of times we overthink to avoid our feelings. And so the counterintuitive thing is that if you can feel what you feel with support,
Right.
then it's easier to move through that. It's easier to then kind of just figure out, okay, this is the way things are. Now let me look around. Let me figure out what's one small step I can take. What's one productive action I can engage in? And you can start to get that car out of that mud pit little by little.
Right. Okay, now you say that it's important to learn to just be with things that are painful instead of overthinking. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that is this another way of saying allowing yourself to, when you're having negative thoughts, when you're blaming people, when you're controlling things too much, when you're feeling all this self-pity, to be able to stop, pause, and ask yourself, okay, what's underneath this? What's underneath this? And then to drop into your body, make some room to feel your own vulnerability. And that's what just being means. It's letting yourself be human without having to fix it, without having to change it. In the moment, just experience the discomfort that this situation that you're in is causing you. That's self-compassion.
Self-compassion. I like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we think we're being compassionate with ourselves when we avoid pain, but avoiding pain isn't always the right answer when it comes to, our inner experiences. So part of, just like if you're afraid of getting on an elevator, you're like, okay, well, I'm just never going to ride an elevator. I'll just always take the stairs, and then I won't have to feel that panic when I get on an elevator or feel that fear. But if you spend your whole life avoiding elevators, your fear of elevators just increases, your panic grows. So part of just being with things rather than overthinking them is about going into the fear and letting yourself feel what you feel with self-compassion.
I like that. Well, and that's the thing. If you have a fear of something and you don't deal with it, it does keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right about that. Okay, so do you think it's normal to want to escape and avoid things that are painful for us?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
is that just because we don't want to face things, or because society has kind of made us think it's natural? Why is it, quote unquote, natural?
Well, there's all kinds of physiological things that happen when we're afraid. We're biologically programmed to stay alive and avoid things that are potentially dangerous. So we naturally try to avoid things that are scary. I think the problem with human beings is partly that we're so complex, and we're not like unicellular organisms or amoebas where you poke an amoeba under a microscope and it'll run away, it'll avoid. But like we go through experiences when we're growing up. I like the example of when, if you're a kid, you're 3 or 4 years old, and you go to pet a sweet-looking dog, and this dog, was a kennel dog, and it had some tough experiences, and it bites you. So, so then you grow up with this fear of dogs, and you panic when you see dogs, or you get scared, or you're hypervigilant about dogs. But all dogs aren't scary. They're wonderful dogs that give you love, and so we need to be able to be objective about the things we're afraid of, and we need to be able to assess, well, do I really need to avoid this now? Even though a scary thing happened with my first boyfriend, do I have to avoid men for the rest of my life? Or, I'm exaggerating, but it's important to be able to recognize that avoidance serves a function, but it's not a healthy way of handling fear.
Right. Now, you know that the title of my show is Ready for Love, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The meaning behind that, you may not know, is, well, what I had in mind when I came up with that was preparing ourselves and getting ourselves ready for love, as in working on ourselves and having ourselves not only physically ready for love, but mentally, emotionally, and all of that, ready for a healthy, loving relationship.
Yeah.
So are there advantages to working on ourselves before getting involved in a relationship?
Absolutely. I think the more you come to understand your own needs, your own limitations, your own vulnerabilities, and the more you're able to be honest with yourself about things that have happened, maybe in your childhood that have created certain tendencies to either, avoid relationships or cling to relationships, the more you can look at your own history and, and own it, just really own it, then you're much more prepared to communicate with a person that you meet that you want to create a life with.
True, and be honest with them and say, "Hey, this is me."
This is me. Yeah, it's funny because we often get involved with people, at least in our younger years, and I think our culture promotes this that with this fantasy that you're gonna fall in love with me, I'm gonna fall in love with you, and you're gonna meet all my needs, and you're gonna be very attuned, and you'll just naturally pick up on what makes me happy, and I won't have to really tell you much. You'll be the right person, and so you'll be the key to my lock or whatever. But that's not how it really works. How can anyone know who you are? You need to know who you are, and it's actually pretty exciting to discover yourself. I don't know if you've had this experience, Nikki, because I know I've listened to your shows, your other shows, and you've done a lot of work, and it's like you need to enjoy your own company and honor your own dreams and your own joy and your own boundaries, so that the person you meet can respect you and enjoy your company too.
Right.
So,
right.
And that takes work.
Well, it's awesome getting to know and figuring out who you are, and then you can honestly introduce yourself to another person.
Yeah.
Because you know who you are.
Right.
And the thing is, then as every person that you meet and become friends with, and more, then you learn more things about yourself through them.
Yeah.
It's a thing. But, I think between every friendship and relationship, we learn something else about ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
and they learn, and they learn about themselves through you. So it's really a mutual learning process. Which again, I mean, not to kind of be just beating the same drum, but that's why the growth mindset is so important, because you can't know today who you're going to be in 4 years, but you can know who you are today.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's you may really like yourself.
Yeah. And
you may like yourself even more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you don't like yourself, and I think that's very human, that we like parts of ourselves, and then there are other parts of ourselves that we judge, we condemn, we're ashamed of, to really almost like find a way to be in approval, even of the fact that you're a work in progress. Parts of yourself, the other parts of yourself you're still trying to accept, and be gentle with that. Like, don't beat yourself up for that. To kind of be kind to yourself as you grow, as you develop, and as you learn.
Right. No doubt.
Yeah.
So what are the advantages to working on ourselves when we're in a relationship?
That's a great question, and I love that. As a couples therapist, I constantly see people working on themselves in a relationship, and I think the advantages are that your partner's going to push all your buttons, and people say to me, well, how is that an advantage? Well, it's an advantage because you know exactly where you need to grow, and you know exactly where your work lies. So there's no mystery. I mean, when you're in a relationship, and let's say, I used to think before I met my husband, I was like, oh, I never get angry. I'm just very peaceful. I'm just one of those people who, is calm all the time. And in my relationship with him, I would get angry, but I would deny it, and I would point the finger at him and say, you're angry. You're the one who's angry. And I learned, because he kept pissing me off so much, whoa, no, actually, I'm a very angry person. I have a capacity to feel very, very angry. So being in a relationship, it pulled kind of pulled the wool off my eyes. I couldn't delude myself. So when you're in a relationship, you can't trick yourself, because you're with another person who's constantly holding up a mirror and saying, look, this is a different version of you that you may not like, but this is how I experience you. And yeah, it's painful, it's hard, it hurts, but it also is very humbling, and it helps you to grow.
Interesting. Huh. I like that. Okay. Now, you mentioned mindfulness earlier, and I've actually done a couple shows about mindfulness. What's the difference between mindfulness and overthinking?
Yeah. So mindfulness is that, just kind of bringing back that metaphor of the river or being kind of on the shore. So the river with the currents is when you're overthinking. That's when you're in the water, you're getting swept over the waterfall, you're being carried along by your thoughts. And mindfulness is when you're able to kind of climb up out of the river and watch your thoughts, observe your thoughts, notice your thoughts. You can't get rid of them necessarily, you can't, avoid them, but you can observe them. So mindfulness is actually a form of healthy awareness, whereas overthinking is just these passive thoughts that keep coming and affecting your ability to be present.
Okay, so mindfulness, you're in charge.
Yeah.
And you're in control of your thoughts and your thought patterns and all that. Overthinking, you're not in control of the thoughts and what's going on.
Yeah, the only thing I would change in what you said is that with mindfulness, you're not so much in control, but you are able to observe. And okay. Then, you know, and that does give you some choice, you know, of how you're going to respond to a situation. And then overthinking, yes, you are not in control. You are, you know, you're not in the driver's seat with the overthinking.
Okay. I like that you add mindfulness and awareness together. I like that. Okay. Okay. So how can we know when we've stopped overthinking our relationships?
So when you're able to start to get curious about your own thoughts, you know, when you have those cues, remember we talked a little bit about, you know, different cues in your life. You can't sleep, or you're irritable, or you're depressed, and your partner's saying you've been behaving differently. So when you can start to look at those cues and get curious and pay attention to your thoughts, maybe do that exercise you suggested of journaling and writing out, okay, what am I thinking about, you know, the fact that my in-laws are coming over next week, you know, and to really write down those thoughts that you're having. You know, they're going to judge me, you know, my mother-in-law always criticizes the way I cook, you know, and to really write out those thoughts and to notice, oh, wow, I'm worrying. I'm in a worry cycle, and it's been going on all day, you know. Oh, can I drop in? Can I see what I'm feeling? And then you can notice, oh, all right, I'm really angry that my in-laws are coming. I wish my partner had asked me for permission first before inviting them over. Oh, okay, so there's a lot of anger here. I'm feeling helpless. All right, and then to kind of accept that, and then maybe from that place you're able to tell your partner, hey, I wanted to have a conversation about your mom and dad coming. Can we talk about this? So you'll know that you've reduced your overthinking. I don't know if it's ever possible to stop it completely, but you'll know you've reduced it when you can be more mindful and bring more attention and awareness to how you're dealing with very triggering situations in your life.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. I'll make that. Okay, one other favorite topic. Do you have tips for establishing healthy boundaries? And I didn't just say boundaries, I said healthy boundaries with a
So, yeah, healthy boundaries. This is a very trendy topic now, and I say that with affection, you know, because it's really, boundaries are so essential in everything that we do and in all of our relationships, and they're also kind of confusing. So first of all, I like people to know that there are 3 different types of boundaries. You know, there are flexible boundaries, and those are healthy boundaries, is when, you know, you have a boundary, you know what you want, you know what you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate, what's acceptable to you, what's unacceptable to you, but you're not rigid about it. You know, you can bend. In some situations, you can be flexible and bend. When you're rigid, that's an unhealthy boundary. If you're always, for example, if you always say no, you know, your friends want to go out with you and you always say no, or your partner wants to, you know, watch Netflix with you and you always say no. Anything that's rigid is an unhealthy boundary. And another form of an unhealthy boundary is when your boundaries are too porous, when you're always yes, you always say yes, you're always trying to please everybody, and then you get super resentful, because you have no time for yourself and you're depleted. So I always tell people that it's really important, number one, state your boundary. For example, So for example, you might say to your partner, when I'm talking to you, please listen without interrupting me. Right? So you're stating your boundary. It's clear. Then it can help to let your partner know why this boundary is going to be helpful. Like, why should they not interrupt you? Like, what's in it for them? How is it going to help your relationship? And you might say to them, well, this is going to help our relationship because if you really listen to me, it's going to be easier for me to listen to you. It's going to be easier for me. Yeah, it's going to be easier for me to hear what you have to say. Once you've heard me, it'll be easier for me to hear you. And, your partner might have a light bulb moment. Oh, okay, well, there's something in it for me. This is going to help us. All right, I'm going to try to respect your boundary. And then number 3, try to use positive language. So, don't say to your partner, well, I don't want you to interrupt me because only jerks interrupt people because, I'm so sick of you interrupting me. You don't respect me. No, that's not going to land. That's not going to be helpful. So try to use positive language. Please don't interrupt me because I want to feel safe with you. I want to feel safe sharing with you. I want to feel safe opening up to you. It's positive. And then fourth step, honor your boundary. This is a really hard step for people. They're like, well, I set boundaries, but he still interrupted me. I don't know what to do now, right? So it's like this step is really about, okay, you set a boundary. Maybe you're going to need to repeat your boundary many times. You might have to repeat it. Okay, I would like to speak. I would like you to avoid interrupting me. Please listen to me until I'm done. And repeat it. Boundaries don't change overnight. And then if your partner still can't meet your boundary, you might want to give them something that there's an author, Nedra Glover-Tawwab. She writes about healthy ultimatums. So give your partner a healthy ultimatum where you might say, it sounds scary, but you might say, if you keep interrupting me, I'm going to stop talking.
I like it. Okay.
So those are some ways.
Awesome. Your tips sound very much like my tips. I like that. Well, and the thing is, if we don't stand up for our boundaries, why should anybody else?
Exactly.
So I like it. Yeah. Okay, you want to let the listeners know how they can find you?
Yeah, I would just go to Alicia Munoz Couples on Instagram, or you can go to my website, www.aliciamunoz, ALICIAMUNOZ.com. I have a free course there and a paid course that I'm just releasing, so you can check those out too.
Awesome. And I'll have all those links on the show page and a replay of today's show. And thank you for being here. Great conversation.
Thank you so much.
I knew I was going to enjoy this. So the replay and links and everything and info about her book will be at lovecoachjourney.com/overthinking. So, but don't overthink. Just that's where the show's going to be. So, seriously, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And we'll have to find something else to talk about sometime. Maybe one of your other books.
Awesome.
Awesome. And listeners, I'll be with you next time on Ready for Love Radio.